Hi there all, Adam here for an EDH Geeks video. So, if you didn't know by clicking the video what this video is about, we're having a bit of an old man rant to a degree, I guess. But not really, I guess, to a degree as well. But we're just trying to be functionally objective to a degree, to an essence of saying things about the reserved list. So, the reserved list for many people who are in the game of Magic the Gathering is a very large issue, and it's been getting quite a lot of attention recently. Now, if you're a bit new to Magic the Gathering, you might be going, what's this reserve list? I've never heard of it. All I know is that Uro is busted in standard. That's it. But or whatever, or I'm so glad that Teferi's finally gone from standard, or whatever. Like things like this. You might be very new to the game, so I don't know. So if you don't know what the reserved list is, it's basically a promise that Wizards made many, many years ago. Now you can look up more information on the reserved list if you wish, but the basic gist of it is that many years ago, when they were making Magic, and it was a smaller game, people valued cards more. And when there was a reprint of cards, well, collectors certainly valued cards more, and people wanted the game to be a collectible game, and people wanted the game to theoretically last. And people argued that if cards didn't have a value, a staying value, that the game wouldn't last, or people would opt out of it, basically. So Wizards basically promised to never reprint certain cards because of a reprint that they did do, but because of that reprint, there was an uproar of people saying, this is going to damage my my card's value, and if this continues to happen to these cards that are very hard to get normally, then what's the point in playing these, because or keeping these or staying in the game, because nothing is worth anything, everything's worth 50 cents. And I can understand the argument to say, well, cards have to be worth something, but I think that you can have your cake and eat it too, in a sense, with a lot of these things, which is to say that the whole dilemma of saying, I need my Bayou to be worth something. Yeah, sure, that's fine. A Bayou should be worth something. Absolutely, because it's one of the rarest lands in the game. Of course, your Mox Sapphire or whatever should be worth something from Alpha, but I don't see that abolishing the reserved list. And a lot of people have been talking about whether we should abolish the reserved list and things like this. And I've talked to some people about, what kind of an effect it would have on Magic overall. And the thing is, we're getting more and more players into the game, and I think this has not been understated enough. There are so many more people playing Magic the Gathering nowadays, especially Commander, which is what we, especially me, or I care about here on this channel, or this part of the channel. So there's just an insane amount of demand for certain reserved list cards that people want to get their hands on, because they're very hard to find, and they're very high in the price range. So a lot of people are saying, well, can we please get rid of this reserve list so I can get my hands on some of these cards, so that I can actually, put some of these cards to play. And that's where I think there's a divide between some people and some other people, which is that there's this huge group of people that are coming into the game, mostly, for the most part, that want access to old cards, and staple cards for their EDH decks, or even perhaps if they're getting into Legacy or Vintage or whatever. And this is another barrier to Legacy, being able for people to be able to even get into Legacy. This is one of the biggest things that occurs every single time anyone ever wants to get into Legacy, besides maybe the fetch lands, is trying to either get the Moxen or trying to get the original dual lands. Those are the cards that have just the highest price tags on the reserved list. So to say these should be on the reserve list, I absolutely agree that those should perhaps be on a reserve list. To say that we shouldn't print them to oblivion, they shouldn't be worth 50 cents perhaps, or whatever. They shouldn't be worth under a certain amount in some cases, I don't think, because they still need to command a certain value. But I don't think that reprinting them once would tank the price on them that much. I think that if you look at Revised, which I know some people have strong opinions on, but, you know, Revised and Unlimited were both reprint sets, I believe, from what I've been reading and told. So if you look at the price difference from the original sort of Alpha Beta Unlimited runs of original dual lands, they're selling for in the thousands of dollars, right? So, and that's just for, you know, generically, you know, good condition ones. You know, ones that are mint and higher are commanding, you know, a couple of $1,000s. So, but you look at the revised ones, and they're commanding like $300 to $400-ish dollars, somewhere in that ballpark. So those reprints that are in that, you know, divide are a huge difference. So if they were to be reprinted, certainly the new ones would be much, much less, but they would still command a certain value. How much value, I couldn't tell you, but they would certainly be higher than what Shocklands are currently, because of their ability to be played not only in Commander, but in Vintage and Legacy, and just being the integral part to being able to get into those formats. And that's where I think people who want to get into the game are struggling, is because there's so many people that are on the other side of the fence that are collectors of old, or, you know, perhaps people who got into Magic many years ago, that have already gotten most of these cards by one way or another, and there's a very limited supply of you know, loose ones or available ones to be had. So it becomes the players versus the collectors to a degree. And look, the cards in our game, they have to command some amount of price because of demand or because of scarcity. That's fine. But what is this? What is this? What is Magic the Gathering? It's a game. So, and look, I don't care about Legacy or Vintage. It's not my format. But, and I don't think 100% that you absolutely need the original dual lands to play Commander. But if people want to get hold of them, they should be able to at a reasonable price. These cards should not be over $300 for the, you know, most basic version of these cards. And, you know, the fact that if they were reprinted, I think that the originals would still hold a lot of their price. They wouldn't hold all of their price, probably. They would probably lose some of it. But the fact is that those specific cards, that edition of card, is going to be as difficult as it is currently, or even into the future to get. So that version of that card is still going to be as collectible as what it is. It might even make those cards more valuable in the long run, because you've got all these people going, well, I've got the original duels, but they're a reprint of the original duels. I want the real original duels. I want the ones from Alpha and Beta and whatever. Excuse me. So there's this area that we're getting into, and I keep sort of harking back to it. How can we manage the reserve list? Because the thing is, I think a lot of people, and somewhat unrightly or rightly, think that the reserve list is this mythical list of cards that are all amazing and super powered and broken, just like the Moxen and, Black Lotus and the original Dual Lands and all these other cards like that. Or, just like super bombs, basically. No, it's not. Basically, beyond the original duels, the Moxen, the Power 9, and a couple of other cards, literally a handful, almost none of the cards that are on the reserved list see any play anywhere. Now, this is not due to price, because we can see that people are paying over $300 for certain cards, or even in some cases over $2,000 to $3,000 for some cards, and even more for Black Lotus. If you find a Black Lotus for under 100,000, I think you're doing, or 100,000 to 10,000, or in that area, you're doing really well, because they're just like so amazingly dumbly expensive that it's ridiculous. Basically. But if you look at it in that context, that means that these cards can't be good. I mean, there's so many cards that are on the reserved list that are very vanilla creatures. There's a very few cards that are actually playable or would actually be played even if they were 50 cents. Look at Shivan Dragon. Look, and that's another way you can prove that the reserve list isn't a big thing, really. And Birds of Paradise, there's another example. The versions that have come out of Shivan Dragon in the last few years, 50 cents or even 25 cents, or basically just free. They give them away they used to give them away in the welcome deck. Birds of Paradise, couple dollars. The original alpha version of Birds is, thousands of dollars. Shivan Dragon, original version, thousands of dollars. So it's not that these cards, those old cards, have actually, suffered at all. The old card is still collectible because it is an old card. Not because the fact that this card has been reprinted. So there is proof out there, and there's many more examples than that, but I am not going to go into all of them, and I don't know all of them, to be honest, and I don't care to go into all of them. This is just the discussion. I want to start this discussion, or not to that degree, but, the discussion has already been started. I'm not going to weigh in that much on it, because, once again, we're a small channel, but look, if people want to talk about it and want to think about it, it's a good thing. And if people want content, which I create, I want to create content that they are interested in. And if people are interested in the reserved list and discussing its merits, or discussing, what potential there is for it and how do we change our environment. Now, of course, the thing about the reserve list is there's a big difference between paper and online. Because in paper is the biggest thing. Online, cards are basically bulk. You know, you can get most cards online on MTGO. Now, I know some people are going to say, oh, MTGO, that was only updated, you know, in 2000, you know, whatever. So, yes, it isn't the best graphics, and you do still have to pay some amount for certain cards, but you would be surprised how little certain other cards are. So, the advent going towards a digital platform is a thing, and it does save you a lot of money in going onto that digital platform. But the thing is, I think there is definitely something about paper magic that will never go away. I think, excuse me for snuffling and that there, but there is something to be said about paper magic never really going away. I think there are a lot of people that love paper magic. There are people that want to continue playing paper magic. They want to go down to their F&M. They want to go and draft. They want to go down there and play their standard. They want to go there and play their pioneer. They want to go there and play their modern. They want to go there and play their vintage or legacy or pauper or whatever. They want to go there and play their commander. That's what it is, because it's not the same to playing on webcam or playing on MTGO. Now, MTGO has a lot of upsides, but it also has a lot of downsides, as we know. It hasn't been updated since 2000 or whatever. Or basically, or whatever, the running joke. But anyway, you know, I keep thinking that how can people not see the issue that is before them, which is the attendance to paper magic events, or the viewership of paper magic events. The vintage legacy events have dropped like a stone. Now, I know there are still some vintage players out there, but the thing is, that format, that zone is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, to be honest. There aren't many people joining in to join Legacy and Vintage, like I said, because of the price problem of getting into those formats. Now, it might be a bit different with Commander, because in Commander, once again, though you don't absolutely have to run these cards, it does make your deck better. Now, not much better, but better. And CEDH is a thing. So there are a lot of CEDH players, and I think that to a degree, it's almost like those players are the post-legacy players, to a degree as well, is that they're just like, well, we can't really get enough games of Legacy or Vintage anymore, but we still want to play, you know, with the cards that we have. We still want to play with the most powerful and broken whatever cards, so we'll play Commander. That way, most of our cards are legal, you know, and we can utilize the most powerful strategies. So that's where I think some of that does come from. Not all of it, no, but some of it, or a lot of it, does come from that sort of mindset of people going, well, I can't really play Legacy or Vintage, and I can just so much easier get games of Commander. So that's just the level of it, is that people, and I've seen, you know, numerous things where a few years ago they basically allowed people to get legacy decks on, I think it was definitely on Moto, but on a PTQ or something, or whatever it was back a couple of years ago, or I heard about it anyway. And they basically let anyone buy the decks basically for free. And those events absolutely exploded, where people were allowed to basically buy this digital deck for free, or rent it for the weekend or whatever it was. Those events skyrocketed because there are people, absolutely so many people, that want to get into these older formats. They love to play with the cards. They want to play the most powerful format in Magic. I don't really understand the whole CEDH or more competitive perspective of playing the game that much. I don't get it. But there's people that do enjoy that, and I still want my decks to be a certain level most of the time of competitiveness. I don't want to just like sit there and play a 2/2 for 2. That's not good enough. It's like, what is this? Like, if it's Scavenging Ooze, maybe it might be good enough, but like, it's got to do something. It's got to have an ability, not just like Vigilance or whatever. Maybe if it's Vigilance, Trample, and some other ability, Vigilance, Trample, Haste on a 2/2, that might be okay. Maybe. But it won't really be that good because, in the format, again, creatures are very easy to remove. So, there's that. But yeah, like, I think if we took I think there's been a lot of cards taken off the reserved list and some other was put on, or I've heard that there has been. So I think that if we took all the quote-unquote jank that's on the reserved list off of the reserved list, I don't think anyone would bat an eye, because none of those cards are really playable and really that rare outside of their original printings. And again, we've got to make this decision, I think, somewhere along the line, where it's like, are we going to allow people to play this game, or are we going to say no one can play this game, or we've got to wait until all these old players or whatever, collectors, have died and passed on, and their, significant descendants or what have you, or subsidiaries or whatever you want to call it, their next of kin or whatever, have decided to sell their Magic the Gathering collection to, clear out some, garage space or what have you. And we just happen to suddenly get a whole influx of these cards. We've got to make that decision where, excuse me, where either players can play this game, have access to most of the cards that they need, or we need to keep tiptoeing around this issue and saying, oh, well, we'll just avoid that like the plague and not address it until all these old players have died. Then we're basically not liable or whatever. We're not going to take the risk of getting sued, potentially. And that's the thing, like, this whole idea that they could get sued for making that promise. I don't know how many people would sue them, to be honest. Like, I think there's just too many people that want to play the game that they'd say, look, if you're going to sue the company in this way for doing this, for allowing me to play the game, or for allowing, 20,000, 40,000, 50,000, more players into the formats that, have been dying for the last few years, because of the fact that these cards are just not accessible enough and not cheap enough. And accessibility sort of fits into being like how expensive they are. They're not only inaccessible by scarcity, but they're inaccessible by price. So, that's where we're at. We've got to figure out what we can do and what we're going to do. We've got to have this conversation where we can say, okay, what are the pros and cons of this? Let's all come to the table. And I think we need to reach out to those older players or those older collectors or those collectors in general and be like, dude, what are you doing hoarding all these cards? Like, really, like, do you really want a 2/2 vanilla creature for 6 or whatever? Like, things like this, like, there's not legitimately that, but just really bad, some of the really bad cards. It's just like, dude, what is this? This does literally nothing except it's valuable. It'll still be as valuable as what it is for the fact that this particular version is very scarce. So I just don't see the huge problem in reprinting these cards. I see a big problem in not reprinting the cards, basically, because, again, even though I've just been saying that there's so many duds in the reserved list, there are certainly many, many cards that are on the reserved list. And I did sort of say, well, there's a handful, but there are many cards on the reserve list that are good and playable and powerful and definitely need to be reprinted and definitely need people to be allowed to play with them. So we've got to have that whole conversation with people to say, hey, come on, it's all right. Your cards are still going to be worth roughly what they are worth now, if not more, in the future. They might take a dip for now, but in the future they'll probably be worth more because people will still want those old versions of these cards, and those versions of these cards are still very hard to get. And yeah, it just boggles my mind sometimes how things are and why they are. And guys, let me know about what you guys think about all of this, because the thing is, like, I've got my perspective on it, which is basically, I want people to be able to play this game. I want to play this game myself, and if I could find myself a Bayou randomly for, whatever, maybe, I don't know, what are we going to say? Maybe $50? I would probably pick one up. Or maybe a few of them up. Or whatever, I'd pick up a lot of these cards if they were $50 or under. Because I would use them in my commander decks, and then I wouldn't feel as bad as owning a original, well, not original Bayou, but a revised Bayou even. Or even if I had an original Bayou, I wouldn't feel as bad as owning one of those, because it doesn't matter to me the era of printing or whatever that it is, as long as it's fairly budget. I cannot really, in my mind, afford a 300 something plus card even in my deck, because it's just silly. It's like, what is going on with this card? This card is worth almost more than most of the deck that I have. And it's just silly to have so much invested in one card. And it's just one of those things where you're just like, dude, if I ever lose this, if this ever gets stolen, that's $300 gone. And that's another argument saying, well, you want to preserve it and you want to keep it and you want it, because it means something. Well, yes, it means something. It means I've lost $300 something. But if it was reprinted, then I'm all for it, because it's like, well, I am not invested in this card. I'm invested in being able to play the game. And if it just so happens to be cheap enough and available enough for me to get, then I probably will get these cards. But if they're at this price point and this inaccessible to get, I feel bad for running these cards in a deck, because it's like, not only that whole thing about saying, well, if it gets stolen or if it gets lost or if it gets damaged or whatever, it's just like, I feel bad, not even though it's not that powerful of a card, perhaps, to what the game actually is and how much more powerful some other cards are, or you know, how much percentage of power difference they have. But just the fact that it would be like, oh my, it's not like I'm playing CEDH over here, you know, where, oh, just because I have an original duel now, my power level is, you know, so much higher than everyone else's. But I do feel bad for people who are newer to the game or whatever, or even, you know, some of the people that just cannot afford it. And I feel bad for myself to a degree because I can't afford it. Because it's like, oh, whoa, no. I'm not going to put $900 extra into my, you know, mana base, you know. You know, I've already, you know, my deck's already, you know, $500 something. I'm, you know, tripling the price of my deck for, or even more, just for 3 more cards, you know, and like I could spend that money on many other cards that would be better for my deck and more powerful in the deck than those 3 cards. So it's just like, I feel bad for putting these cards in because it's like, well, they're just not that, really not that good. They're not worth the investment to a degree. If they were much cheaper, then that's fine, you know. But guys, I think I've sort of rambled on long enough, and I've snuffled along long enough as well in this video. I am a little bit sick, so, but I'm all right. No coronavirus here. But I am a little bit sick, so I'm trying to get a couple more videos out really quickly before I have to sort of, you know, sort of quarantine and do other things, and or not quarantine, but sort of quarantine for a little while, take a couple of days off, just because I'm a bit sick. But anyway, guys, hope you've been able to stand my snufflings, and I hope that you're not too put off, and that you'll come back again, and that perhaps you'll bring some friends. And if you would be so kind, also help us out, support us on our Patreon, do all the good things, help us out. I really do appreciate it, and thanks for watching.